Guys, I got a lot of questions on a recent video I did about Matt Walsh, so I figured that there were a lot of them, and it's probably a good idea to go ahead and answer some of those. I could have answered them in the YouTube comment section, but I Wow, I can't speak. Instead, I decided to make it content. Anyways, let's get to the fan art section, and then we will get right into said content. This first one is from The Void, said been lurking for a bit. Thought I'd share the slime cat Suris that made its way into my new sketchbook. I do not expect you to say it. You're right, I won't. The next one we have here is from The Mind Canary. I've been lurking for a while, and I've drawn a few pieces, but didn't think they were good enough to post. But I heard, don't remember when, some stuff about Suris and protogens. So here is Proto Slime Suris. You fucking furries. Always. Anyways, thank you very much for that one. The last one we have here is from Winter Nova. So I used an AI to make a witch Suris, and this is what it generated. Well, that is a thing. Ivana, thank you for redeeming your points. 50,001 of them. Oh, whoa. There. Are you happy? Are you pleased? Drossus, thank you for redeeming your points for an ara. You fucking degen. Anywho, as always, everybody, thank you all for your fan art submissions. If you want your fan art to be shown in a future video, remember to drop it in the fan art section of the Discord. With that all said, if you have not already subscribed or hit the bell notification icon, please consider doing so. And with that said, let's go ahead and get right in. So I want to go ahead and say real quick, please do not send harassment over to this user. Never, ever, ever, when I show a person's name, should you go and harass them. This is a public YouTube comment, so whiting out the name doesn't do anything. People can just do a Control F for the questions. This is from SDozer1990. Just some tough questions to think about for curiosity. Well, if they're tough, let's go ahead and chew on them for a bit. What do you think about Matt Walsh's political commentary in general? All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop on that question, and let's go ahead and analyze this one real quick. What do I think about Matt Walsh's political commentary? I think that it's horseshit from top to bottom. I find that Matt Walsh does political commentary not just in a biased way, which we all do, but in a way that reeks of a man who has an agenda. If you look at the editing behind his What is a Woman documentary, and if you look at the topics he chooses to cover, everything he does is for the purpose of inciting outrage. Either outrage from lefties who are reacting to him, or outrage from people who are on the right wing of politics and freak out at every little thing that he throws their way. Very much of what he does, I find to be incredibly dishonest, and very much a ton of the content that he produces on his channel, as I've said, seems to be for the sole purpose of provoking that outrage, not actual critical analysis. Now, it has the veneer of critical analysis. That's the thing with Matt Walsh's videos. It's why when I cover Matt Walsh, I try to go through as much of his video as I can, because he has the veneer of seriousness when he does content. But all I get when I analyze his content further is snide derision. I don't find him to be a worthwhile political commentator. In fact, if he did the exact same type of content that he does right now, but had no following, I would probably not do anything to, cover his content at all. The only notoriety there is for Matt Walsh, for me, is the amount of people that he speaks to. Obviously, his rhetoric works for some reason, so obviously his rhetoric is the type of rhetoric I need to be talking to and about. Then we get on to the next one. When you think about God, do you think you become more just or have a better idea of right and wrong? This question feels to be a bit malformed. And I'm not saying that to be derisive myself, but when I think about God, I don't think I become more just or have a better idea of right and wrong. In fact, actually, if we talk about Matt Walsh's God specifically, the Christian God, I think my ideas about right and wrong actually become a little more concerning. Because when I think about right and wrong, I think about utility. I think about the amount of suffering that is garnered from an action versus the amount of suffering that the action alleviates. Going to the gym involves me suffering, but it might alleviate other problems for me down the road. So going to the gym is a positive. when I think about Matt Walsh, I think about the types of things that he puts on his channel. I think about the effect they have on people. If you're on the right wing of politics, all he does is confirm your biases. And if you're on the left wing of politics, all he does is get you angry. The things that he chooses to focus on, though, tend to make minorities suffer more. Here lately, it has been almost primarily LGBTQ, or specifically trans people, as the minority that he chooses to target. At the best, people get a little bit of catharsis from watching whatever cringy thing he puts on his channel, but at its worst, he creates environments where harassment happens. And when I throw God into that picture, it doesn't make it any better. It doesn't change my utilitarian view of things. I feel like the idea of a God and the idea of good are necessarily separate. If good is whatever God wants, then what is good is ultimately arbitrary and doesn't matter. And if God is beholden to a separate idea of good, then at the very least, we can make him consistent within himself, but now you've stripped power away from your God. Doesn't matter if you happen to be, I don't know, somebody who's a polytheist, whose ideas of good do not necessarily stem from their gods. But for somebody like Matt, where it has to, it starts to confuse the conversation more than it does add to it. At least for me. I don't know. When I think about God, I don't think I become more just. I don't think I get a better idea of right and wrong. I think right and wrong just get a lot more confused. When we talk about the Christian God, we're talking about a God who was willing to drown an entire population because of a plan he himself enacted. We are talking about a God who was willing to kill his only son because of a plan he enacted. We're talking about a God who created hell as a punishment for people, but as he is the one in ultimate control of everything, those people get to go to hell, and it's his fault. He is in control of all things, and all things happen to his plan, according to his plan. Which also means people go to hell as part of his plan. I'm sorry. Because of that, none of those things register as right to me. My utilitarian view of right and wrong, they don't process any of that well. So again, when I think about God, I don't think I get more just or have a better idea of right and wrong. I think God muddies those conversations. The next thing we have here is when appealing to objective morality, pointing to an object. Does it have to be an object, or could it be a person, place, thing, or idea? So it can be a person, place, thing, or idea. That's the thing. So an object is just a person, place, thing, or idea. An object is just that. Somebody's objective morality could come from the Bible. Their objective morality could come from any written text at all. The definition here doesn't matter too terribly much. Objective morality is any morality that is absent of yourself that you have to point to another thing in order to get your morality from. That thing can be a person, place, or idea. As an example, divine command theory is an objective framework for morality for the theist. However, divine command theory, just for those who don't know, is the idea that God creates all laws, God creates the ideas of morality. Cool. However, that is not objective morality for that God. It necessarily, that specific type of morality, necessarily relies on the mind of that deity. So while it's an objective morality for people who worship that God, they get to point to that God as the dictate for their morality. However, that God could change their mind tomorrow, and suddenly what is good and what is wrong change. People tend to look at objective and subjective morality as this black and white thing and a be-all, end-all for philosophical conversations. Largely, they're not. If you ever do yourself the disfavor of going to the Stanford Encyclopedia and looking up morality and reading the pages upon pages upon pages of entries about morality in there, which I need to reread because they actually updated in the last few years, and I'm very upset about that, but also that's how conversations happen. If you go and look at that, there are several types of morality that exist within and without the objective-subjective dichotomy. I think you'll find that it's a fascinating road to go down. I think morality is something that is more interesting to me as a conversation than as a bludgeon. And we frequently use it as a bludgeon. And that's probably my biggest problem. Should we always go by common or collective agreement as a fully truthful standard? Is there room for individual reason? Is there room for challenges to common or collective agreement as a standard for rights? So yes, there is always room for individual reason. There's always room for individual challenges. However, recognizing that there's room for those individual challenges won't change that common consensus on its own. Collective agreements about trans people, for instance, sometimes begin with individual reason and individual arguments. For instance, the science behind what makes a person trans and the experiences that they go through, that science oftentimes is documented by a single person in a journal, and then that journal goes through peer review. And as that journal goes through peer review, the room for collective agreement begins. As scientists test the data that is in that initial journal, or that initial entry, rather, you submit a publication into a journal. Terminology. But as the peer review process happens, the collective agreement starts, beginning from the individual reason. The problem, though, is that sometimes there are people that challenge the statement, all humans deserve rights to their own body, with appeals to things like slavery. Is there room for them to challenge those agreements? Yes, and there's just as much room for people to shout them down. Now, the next one we have here is bodily autonomy applicable to questions of justice? I might need a little bit of clarification on this. I do think bodily autonomy is applicable to questions of justice specifically, because realistically, bodily autonomy comes in play a lot when we talk about something like, say, rape, or something like physical assault. Physical assault of any kind is an attack on your bodily autonomy, and our justice system, ill-equipped as it is, categorically is applicable to those questions. The next one we have here is do we actually have a right to bodily autonomy? So, most people do not want their bodies fucked with against their will. Most people agreeing on that would be enough of a basis for that to be considered a right in my book. Again, rights are anything that we as a society collectively agree that we are all owed. Most people believe we have a right to food, water, healthcare. Whether or not governments treat those things as rights is also up to us. We are the ones that create our governments, after all. We are the ones that enshrine ourselves and our peers in those places of power, at least in democracies and republics, sometimes within reason, kind of, sort of. So, do we actually have a right to bodily autonomy? I would argue that from a functional perspective, yes, we do and should have one. Does the U.S. Constitution enshrine bodily autonomy as a right? Yes, the United States Constitution does actually. Amendment 14, when it grants the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that has been ruled several times to de facto lead into, if not even de jure lead into, a right to one's own body. If the skilled violinists were inside or otherwise attached to your body, would they have a right to your body? No. They are a different person. They have no right to my body, and I have no right to theirs. If a baby doesn't have rights inside the womb, is there a good standard for how to deal with them? Yes. Everything where that baby is concerned is under the jurisdiction of the mother, or whomever happens to be bearing that child, for the time that that child is inside their body. Once the child is outside of their body, there is the degree, there is the delineation. Now, there are some people who will disagree with me on that and argue that actually it should be at the point of viability that the child should start gaining rights. I disagree with that because, again, the violinist is a viable person outside of your body, and they still don't deserve rights to your body. Whether or not we allow for abortion after that point, or just simply early ejection, that is a matter that is separate as far as I am concerned. Because once the child is outside of the body, whether in one piece or many, that is when the rights of that person potentially begin. And again, that's only a potential. It's only after they are born or otherwise removed. If a corpse is removed, then we default to the amount of rights that we grant a corpse. And we actually do grant rights to corpses, awkwardly. If you don't believe we grant rights to corpses, then I want you to ask how many organ donors you know. Because organ donation as a concept is literally based on how much of a right you have to your own body once you're dead. We grant rights to corpses. So if you think that anything I said was malformed before, hopefully I've given evidence that no, we don't. Or it wasn't, rather. If a person has bodily autonomy, does a baby have bodily autonomy? At the point that it is born, yes. At the point where it is reliant on the mother's body or the person's body, no. If a baby has a right to bodily autonomy, does the mother have a right to kill the baby's body? While the baby is inside the mother, yes. Once the baby is not inside the mother, no. Does the money come from society or its government? Both. Economics are interesting. And honestly, my friend Ira Swede would be the best person to answer this question more than anything. But money comes from a government and also from its people. The value attached to that money is largely going to be based on a combination of government standardizations and also how people utilize that money in any given system. How much money is allowed to exist within that system, which may or may not come from government regulation or private regulation, depending on what system you have. In America, it's a little fucky. We have something called the Federal Reserve, which kind of loans money out to the government at interest, which makes the idea of money a little bit weird when you think about it. But realistically, money is just an arbitrarily socially constructed concept that we have used to assign a universal value to all goods and services. That can exist from within a society, and that can exist from within a government. I would argue that in the United States, it exists as a combination of both. Do rights come from a society or its government? So, rights come primarily from a society. However, the job of the government is to enshrine those rights. The job of the government is to protect those rights, to enforce those rights. The individual rights come from individual people and people en masse arguing that their rights are important and should be looked at. The government's job then is to take those arguments, take those situations, and then create an environment where those rights can be respected, or there are punishments for violating those rights. Now, our opinion on what a punishment for violating a right may vary. Like, it may be different. My opinion is that for violating a human right, you should have to go through a form of rehabilitation. I am an advocate of reformative justice as opposed to punitive justice. Punitive justice does not necessarily always lead to higher yields of results. Here in America, we have one of the highest incarceration rates, but also one of the highest rates of people going back into jail after they have left. I believe it's called recidivism. As a result of that, the government's job in protecting those rights, I would say we need to get better about how it protects those rights, because obviously we're not doing a good job of it right now, but I would still stick with my answer. The rights come from the people, and then the government's job is to then enshrine those rights. Make sure those rights are protected, as opposed to taken for granted. Codify what were previously spoken agreements. The last one is, as stated above, these questions are out of curiosity, and that's fair. I did note to them that these questions will become a video. I don't know if they actually responded to that, because I screenshotted these after doing that. So I'm not 100% certain if they've actually seen that I've said that these are going to be made into a video. But if you end up seeing this video after the case, then hopefully you will enjoy. Hopefully my questions have been given in an honest and earnest way as far as you are concerned. But that is how I feel about all of that. Human rights to me still come from people. Government's jobs are to enshrine those rights. There are people that have existed before governments, and they still had some idea of what their rights were or were not before governments were a thing for human societies. Fisher Sauce has super amazing outfit, by the way. GG to the artist. Salem Sky did a wonderful job on this Christmas outfit. Hopefully that was somewhat informative to people who are watching. Hopefully y'all enjoyed that a little bit. I want to do more videos like this one if I can help it, but I recognize also I say that a lot. I say that I want to do more videos in a particular way, form, or fashion quite a bit, and I really should get better about following up on some of those types of videos that I want to do. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. hit the like button if you haven't already. Subscribe if you haven't already. Please go ahead and check out the sponsor of this video, Factor 75, to get 60% off your first box from them. They are a meal kit service that offer meal kits for a variety of dietary needs, and you can use my coupon code FACTORSE10507, and there's a link in the description that you can use to go ahead and do that. But with that all said, that's enough for me. Thank you all for watching, and as always, everybody, insert end of video tagline here.